So it's going to be a short session. When students set up business, we have CEOs of startup, also people related to the career scene and also corporate. So first let me introduce Vinayak, this Vinayak Berman. He runs a law firm, also a podcast which deals with a very interesting topic which he'll tell you all about. And that's Nakul. He's a co-founder and CMO of Cashify. That's India's leading e-commerce platform when it comes to mobile and other gadgets recently. We have one more panelist. He'll be joining us shortly. So when it comes to, talking about startups and building your own business, it seems the trend from a secure job or a secure profession has kind of completely shifted to doing your own business. Of course, I'll start with Vinayak then, because, Vinayak, you also do a podcast where a lot of career guidance and advice is given on the podcast, otherwise also along with your clients also. So what's the trend that you've seen? I mean, is there, particularly when it comes to youngsters and people who are getting into business or getting into the profession, so to speak, is there a trend to not maybe work for, even if it's a cushy corporate job, is a trend more to go for your own thing? Have you seen a kind of shift, or how would you put it?
I think, thank you first of all, Sunil, for having me here. Really appreciate it. I think trend as a term is slightly overrated. It's actually directly proportionate to a great aspect to your background. If your background comes from a situation where you don't have to worry for food on the table, then your ability to go across and chase passion, अच्छा खासा feeling आता है ना, लोग बोले कि you should drive your passion, you should chase your passion. If you do what you're passionate about every day, 24/7, you'll never think it's like work. All of those are directly proportionate to whether you can afford to have the passion. When you can afford to, yes, there's a whole bunch of youngsters who straight away try to dive in and do certain things which they want to do, saying that you start on your own. But there's a huge number of people, which still I think is the much larger mass, where people are first working. During that work period, in the first 1, 2, 3 years, is where a lot of ideation happens. A lot of times you meet people who are very similar to your fabric, very similar to your thought process. That's where the first essence or the thought or an understanding of what is called a co-founder, potential co-founder comes in. You exchange ideas. You spend a lot of time moonlighting to yourself. आप सुबह काम करते हो नौकरी के लिए, रात को आप काम करते हो अपने ideation के लिए. And then when you believe that yes, things can shape up is where you see a lot of people taking that plunge. I also would like to think that a lot of times today, Sunil, entrepreneurship is glamorized. The social media glamorizes it to a great extent, saying here, you only see the success, you only see the validation, you see a lot of external validation. You look at these 40 under 40s, 30 under 30s, and all the fancy nomenclatures that keep coming, and people jump into it saying, yaar, macha denge yaar, entrepreneurship matlab machana. But hakikat ye hai ki yaar, a lot of times people forget that for every success, there are 1,000 failures. For every win, there are 1,000 losses. So you have to have that mindset to recalibrate yourself to say, ki yaar, you can't jump into entrepreneurship for the sake of jumping. It is a calling. And that calling is a very deep calling to say कि अगर जिंदगी में सारे चीजें जो obvious है, सारे चीजें जो जरूरी है, everything that's very important for you, if you let go of all of those and that calling still survives, that calling is still as strong, then perhaps you jump in. So I won't degrade the emotion of entrepreneurship by calling it a trend. I think it's far more in terms of saying, Sunil, that if your original calling comes in, then you will take that call. Because I keep saying this, it's a Suleimani Kira. Hai to sone nahi dega, nahi hai to jagne nahi dega. So at the end of the day, if that calling is there, depending on time, when you think is the right, you will take that plunge.
Right. Like you said, entrepreneurship is glamorized quite a bit. But then we have somebody with us who has had failures, but then has reached that glamorous part all of us would like to maybe lead in our dream. That is Nakul, who's a co-founder of Cashify, which is now a 2,000 crore plus company, and the number one in its field when it comes to who hit upon a very unique idea of old mobile phones and electronic gadgets and that reseller segment. So now, could you tell us, like, what was your whole journey about? Because you also had tried other areas and other businesses. And what is it that works? But is it an idea? Is it a what is it that made you get into each and every sector, each and every company? And was it the dream of making it big? Was the dream of making big money? Or was it solving a problem? Or what was it that drove you into whatever you did?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think just wanted to correct you. Have yet to reach the glamorous part. Still early days of struggle. But I think, and I really resonate what he said. Right. I had the privilege of not paying for my sister's wedding, or I didn't have to worry about that my parents, how will they survive if I don't work. And that privilege allowed me to straight get into entrepreneurship after college. And hence, I think it is very person dependent on what your circumstances are and where it takes you. So that was me. So I passed out of MBA in 2009. Not a great year to pass out. We were in middle of the recession, and I think it made me. It forced me to get into entrepreneurship because I thought that was the only logical step available to me. And since then, and we started Cashify in 2013. So in 5 years, we ran multiple businesses. Two of them were mildly successful, while two of them were failures. So, but every time, and I think the only thing which works for an entrepreneur is never give up. You can keep having failures, but if you give up, then that is the ultimate uh, failure. So hence, my only advice to any students or is that it is not going to happen overnight. And this is the trend which I'm seeing right now, which scares me. Is I see super smart people getting into entrepreneurship and with smart ideas, and if they don't see success in the first couple of years, they're super dejected. uh, they want to get back to corporate world, they want to make more money, and it doesn't happen. It may happen to one out of thousand, but doesn't happen to everybody. And I also feel if all the thousands stick around for another 5 6 years, everybody can be successful. It's just they don't stick around. So, and in my journey, we've just survived, and that when you survive longer in an industry, you thrive, and then you rule. And that's what I can say about that.
Right, right. So coming back to you, Vinayak, you said you don't like the word trend, but still, when it comes to selecting the business that you want to get into, there are certain waves that come in. You know, like if you look at the last decade, it was all about consumer-facing businesses. You know, there was a app for cab hailing. There was an app for food delivery, like that. Now, what is it that we're moving into? People talk about heavy engineering. People talk about deep tech, like that. What is it that we are looking at? Suppose somebody who's getting into Siddharth. Yeah, let me introduce our third panelist, Siddharth Panel.
I have the privilege of handling this to you.
Thank you so much.
Siddharth will come to you in a second, but Vinayak, yeah.
So I'll get into sunrise sectors in a moment, but I want to take on to what Nakul said, and this is for the audience. More importantly, he underplayed a very important aspect in terms of patience. So I called it the Elichi moment. Why is it the Elichi moment? And for the audience to get that little bit of more vibe, इरशाद फरमाइए, फिर हम बताएंगे दो शब्द कि इलायची के दाने सा मुकद्दर है अपना. This is every entrepreneur, and that is where patience comes in. कि इलायची के दाने सा मुकद्दर है अपना. महक मेरी दोस्त बिखरी उतनी पीसे गए जितना. So at the end of the day, the whole essence of entrepreneurship, what he talks about is he's underplaying it, but to be there, to hold on, to stay on when, see, when you have tailwinds, it's very easy. Tailwinds will always go across and say that, you're on the curve, you're on the upper trajectory of success. But when headwinds come in, is when your mindset comes in. And for an entrepreneur to determine success, to be able to be there with that mindset to say, come what may, I need to survive this storm. Come what may, I need to survive this emotion, this moment, is very important. And there's some term that we all agree and we've all gone through, is the 1,000-day test. यार आपको 1,000 दिन तो लगते हैं just to go across and be in that aspect to say that perhaps you're on the right path. Uske baad se the growth comes in. So coming back to your point now, Sunil, see, sectors are very interesting. Sectors are also very cyclical. There is always going to be sectors which are evergreen. There are always going to be sectors which will do well. And then there will be sectors which are very seasonal. Sid's a very old friend of mine, fantastic entrepreneur, understands education is a great sector, but he also knows, and we also agree, that tech per se came in at a time when perhaps the whole world was dwindling with whether you can survive as a humanity. But that particular tech-based venture, whether it's EdTech, whether there's any other techs that came in, because it was so cyclical and so apt, grew to some of the largest behemoths of this country. So today, yes, there are multiple sunrise sectors. You look at deep tech, you look at AI, you look at a lot of defense tech, you look at a lot of, satellite tech, agri-tech, which is coming in. These are sectors where technology, as long as an enabler, will always be there. The larger challenge is to understand whether you can go across and identify sectors which, while tech may be an enabler, but it also has multiple other aspects behind it. To say that tech is one initial driver, but the business and the sector has depth enough. So I think more than identifying just sunrise sectors, it's more about looking at sectors which are rock solid, which are sectors which go across and say that you're solving a problem which is always there to be solved. Because no problem is truly ever solved. It can only get solved to stages. It can only keep getting better. Like I keep saying, you can never not fail. You can only fail better. And the idea is to fail better every time. So try and solve better every time. And as long as you identify those, I think the impact's far deeper. And perhaps the key takeaway for our audience, if they are looking at any such, is to identify those aspects where the ability to keep solving, resolving, and upsolving becomes that much more important.
Right.
And so, just to add to this, I think another very important aspect is to always identify the core strength of yours and to be true about it. If it's not going to marry the domain or the problem you're going to solve, or you have not experienced the problem, or you have some advantage in that domain, it may be the best domain. For example, it may be AI right now, but you will fail because you don't have the upper hand. So it is very important to understand what your core true strengths are and marry that to the problem or the domain.
Very true, Nakul, because we had Minister Jitendra Singh here a little while earlier. In fact, he was saying the same thing. That was his advice to all the students that, you focus on what you're good at, focus on what you want to do, and then you work at it. You hone your skills and you work at it. So, very much. Now, let me come to Siddharth. Let me just introduce him first of all. Siddharth has been a corporate for the longest time. He's been with a spate of high-profile companies from Unilever to Games 24/7 and Facebook. And now he is the founder and CEO of Univo, which is a edutech firm based in Noida, and it's valued at around 2,000 crores. But first, let me come to you. Again, the same thing. Like, you've been in corporate side and you've got your startups too. So what is this? I asked them earlier the same thing. What is this attraction, the lure of, you've been in a cushy, we would call it a cushy, nice job, corporate, and, traveling around and meeting people. Then from that to get into something so maybe a bit uncertain, something like a startup thing. What is it that made you take the plunge?
Sure, thank you. Firstly, to my fellow panelists here and to the audience, my apologies for joining the conversation slightly late. Thank you for the question. I've spent about 25 years overall working post my MBA, and like you said, the first 20 years were pretty much spent in the large organizations. And for every kind of young person or people who work with young persons, you'll see this, that there is something called the script that we follow post school, post college, post, let's say, a professional degree like an MBA. And then there are people who walk off the beaten path. So there is a path, which is a script, and then there is a off the beaten path. So for me in particular, it was the script that I followed for the first 20 years, which was Unilever, Vodafone, Facebook, large companies, as you know. And then, of course, I kind of took the path less followed in the rough and tumble of entrepreneurship, of startups, which was in gaming, which was Games 24/7, or now in education, which is Univo Education. But I think three things for everybody who's working with young people and young professionals. The first thing, and this is what I always say to folks who look for how do I become successful in my career? So three things I would say. The first thing is that for every person who's on that journey, doesn't matter whether you are a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, doesn't matter, but you should have a pretty good idea about your strengths and what doesn't really work for you. So what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So the first point is about self-awareness. How do I play this back into my life? I was self-aware that in the first 20 years of my life, my risk-reward expectation was moderate. I could take moderate risk. There were other people, my peers, who took greater risks, who would have perhaps more stomach to face more uncertainty and to build the kind of companies that entrepreneurs build with fair amount of flux and uncertainty. So the first thing is self-awareness. The second thing is learning curve. Whichever segment, whichever industry, whichever role you are in, I think my advice to young people always is to look at how vertical your learning curve can be. Because there is something called the eighth wonder of the world, which is compounding. So if your learning curve is near vertical, it basically means that you have set yourself up for a higher degree of success. Doesn't necessarily mean that you will be successful or you will necessarily have a formula, but you have invested in yourself. So the first point was on self-awareness. The second point was on vertical learning curve. Now again, when I play this back to my career, I've had the privilege of learning in all my jobs, whether it was large companies, medium companies, or the startup world. So the second point is about learning curves. The third point is kind of related to what Vinayak said earlier, is about the ability to take measured risk. And of course, there are entrepreneurs here who will have a different view of risk than I would have, but to continuously fall forward, to continuously keep upskilling yourself, to keep investing in yourself, and to look at how can I be better tomorrow. So for me, the bar has never been, am I better than some other person? For me, the bar always has been, am I better today than I was yesterday? And what am I doing to be better tomorrow? So I think those are the three kind of learnings, experiences, distillations that I've had over the last 25 years of my career.
Okay. Nakul, let me come to you. You've had Cashify, which has been quite a bit of a success. So there is a saying that, getting into a startup is kind of easy compared to how holding on and, maintaining the business and the kind of challenges that you face. Could you maybe give us an example, or like what's it been like after the idea, the business clicked? You must have faced challenges or problems, and how do you deal with that? That's a secondary stage. People often think about making it big, but never think about how to maintaining it later on.
कितने बताऊं? But I'll tell the biggest one. The company is called Cashify because we used to give cash for your old phones, and demonetization happened in 2017, right? So, yeah, and we didn't have cash to give out. The business model fell flat on its face, right? We used to give actual cash. We used to come to your home, you give us a phone, the guy will go to the nearest ATM, we have built a tech, take out the exact amount, give you that much cash, take the phone and go. And we did this because India is a low trust economy and people don't believe in bank transfers. UPI did not exist as a system there. And in one go, the business model went for a toss. Now imagine at that time we had about 300 people, we had salaries, we had stocks, but no cash in the system. So we had to pivot overnight where we contacted banks, did API integrations, everything overnight, and turned the business model around saying that now we only give through bank, we only give through UPI, we only give through, we built new tech where you can put your credit card through the swipe machine and we put money in the credit card. So, but we almost died. It took us 2 months to all do this. We are a cash flow business, right? We buy, we sell. That's how we generate revenue, profit. That's how salaries go on. If you don't do business for 2 months, you're just burning money through the door. So challenges, and you have to look at those challenges and then get up in the morning every day and say, hey, I am responsible for 300 families and let me better get to office and figure out a solution. And that happens every year. There's something or the other which is happening, be it COVID, be it Donald Trump tariffs or something like that. But you just keep moving on, figure out what the best course of action is and work around it.
Siddharth, I was just wondering, you advise a lot of companies, including a lot of startups, many successful startups. So I'm just kind of presuming that there could be some startups also you advised, probably who are not maybe that successful. So can you give us an analysis of what did you see that worked, rather from the part of the startup founders, the attitude or the approach to work? What was it that clicked as compared to certain maybe habits or a certain approach from some other clients who you could see was not working? How, if for a person who wants to get into a business,
Sure.
how would you kind of give a...
I think everyone and their cousin wants to do a startup, but it's incredibly hard. Incredible. And Nakul spoke about one near-death moment. There could be many. In my experience, I think the first thing that I've seen successful founders do is have the ability to define the problem well. Most startups will fail because you're solving for something that either does not really exist or it exists, but there is no viable demand or no viable way to meet that need. So I think the first is problem definition. And there I have a personal bias, I have a personal preference. It might be different for different people. I like to solve at the center of the plate. हम लोग जिसको हिंदी में राजमा चावल कहते हैं. So you can solve on the sides of the plate, which means you can solve for a mithai, you can solve for a dal, but I like to solve in the middle of the plate, a core need, an evergreen need, something that the consumer will definitely need. Unless, of course, you're an entrepreneur or a founder who's thinking of creating an absolutely new category or an absolutely new need, which is genius. But my personal preference, as I said, is to try and see if there is a center of the plate innovation. And that's what I've seen a lot of successful founders do. So that's first, problem definition and what need are you really serving? And my personal little tadka there is that if you're solving in the center of the plate, your probability of success might just be higher. So that's one. The second thing that I've seen successful founders do very well is to figure out a bunch of people around them who can really work with them on the mission. And this is your early founding, like so-called early founding team. And these are the people who will believe in you, who will back you at a point of time where none of the glitz and glamour, where none of any external validation that exists, because the first few years are pretty hard. So finding that, getting those bunch of people, aligning them on the mission, and for them to stay on the journey has been the other hallmark of successful founders versus people who've had a great problem definition, but who have sputtered somewhere along the way. And then, of course, the third part of being a great founder is to constantly fuel the mission. Now, that mission can be fueled either in terms of capital, which is where you might need to have innovative ways of raising revenue, which could be your revenue, or if you are borrowing capital, or it could be finding new markets or new partners, so fueling the mission. I think these three things, for me, have been hallmarks of great entrepreneurs.
Okay, I'll just put a question out there. Any of you can answer. See, when you look at startups and general focus is almost always on what is the core idea. That's one thing. And of course, funding takes a lot of precedence. But which are the lesser known or rather important factors which people don't really think about? Like, I think you kind of almost touched upon the fact that, your team is so important, the kind of people you have around you. Like that, can any of you let's give some kind of tips on what are the things that people don't really focus on when they get into a startup, but which is so crucial as you proceed along?
Sure. So I'll break this up into a few things, and then of course, Sid and Nakul can give their experience. See, for me, from the time I built Vertices Partners and from the time I started the podcast for Lifeboat, one of the reasons was to understand for 25 years I've been advising founders. Some of them are super successful today. Some of them are, building unicorns. Some of them have built unicorns. Some of them are still struggling. But there's one common fabric across all of them. And that fabric is perhaps the core ethos of what you build and how you build and who you have around you. And that is called the founder's mindset. I think everything, when you go down the whole construct of bottling it up to say that if there's one potion, there's no magic potion. But if there's one answer that you can factor in, is to go across and have your mindset very clearly attributed. And within that mindset, how many similar people of fabric can you go across and factor in? That first team that you spoke about is the most non-glamorous cohort, the most tried, teared up, broken, crazy, mad cohort, which cannot stick together unless and until the fabric of the mindset is put together. And mindset, again, I like saying this in different ways, but for me, a lot of it is about a mix. So I think I'll elucidate it a little bit in John Saab style. Some of these things are very core to your heart. Why is mindset so important? So John Saab ने एक बार कहा था कि सलाम करते हैं रास्ते उस मुसाफिर को, कि सलाम करते हैं रास्ते उस मुसाफिर को जिस मुसाफिर के पैर में हर रोज नए छाले होते, कि सलाम करते हैं रास्ते उस मुसाफिर को जिस मुसाफिर के पैर में हर रोज छाले होते। तुम बुझने मत दो अपने दिल की दरारों को, तुम बुझने मत दो अपनी दिल की दरारों को, इन दरारों से ही तुम में उजाले होते हैं. So end of the day, the mindset is what will keep your tribe together, and failures are constantly going to happen. Problem is when you start looking at failures to say that they are the reasons for going down a different direction. Nakul spoken about one near-death experience, and as Sid said, there would have been multiple such. What do you do to stay alive? The fact that you have the positivity to be able to adaptive, you have to adapt overnight. It's not a joke. Regulations are not on your side. Sector is not on your side. The regulators are not on your side. The crisis moment is there, but are you still in that eternal optimistic mindset? I keep saying this, founders are eternal optimists. If you're not eternal optimists, don't get into the role of entrepreneurship, because it's a very lonely role. It'll break you every day. It'll make you cry every day. It'll make you quit every day. But you still have to come back and say, yaar, kuch nahi hota, fir bhi karenge. Because at the end of the day, it's not about external validation. जो दिखता है वो बिकता है, unfortunately. And I keep saying, the entrepreneurs are keels. अब पूछो कील क्यों? पूछो क्यों? दा उम्र भर वो कील बोझ उठाता रहा. And this is what you guys will resonate a lot with. दा उम्र भर वो कील बोझ उठाता रहा, और ये कमबख्त दुनिया जो उस तस्वीर की वाह करके निकल गई. So at the end of the day, what you see is only the external elements. You don't see the tears, the trials, the tribulations. So to be able to collect that, I think you summarize, in my view, after Having advised, I don't know, I've lost the count of how many people I've advised, but or 25 years means a whole bunch of people, but I can tell you this much, the common fabric across all successful stories, and success is very relative, but common fabric across all successful stories has been that mindset to say, I will never give up, I will continue, and your cohort, if it has the same mindset, you're very lucky. Then you can keep building. That's the way I would summarize one ingredient, which is very, very important, because that, to my mind, summarizes everything.
I'd like to just build on the point that Vinayak said. And since this is a conclave which is sponsored by the week, and therefore there is a certain role that the media might also want to have in this, is that entrepreneurship is not typically, there are of course exceptions to this. It is not typically a 2-year or a 3-year gig. It never is. So this journey that Vinayak spoke about is typically a long journey. And the founder mindset and the founding team mindset has to be one that they are on it consistently for year after year. It could be a decade, and no glamour there, no mega stories there. It is just about constantly staying the course. I think that's one thing that I have learned from some of the most successful founders that I worked with. Nothing is an overnight success. Or the other definition of overnight success is 15 years. 15 years is overnight success. Yeah, it's 15 years. Yeah. So I think that's something that which I find that is not spoken about enough. Everyone is thinking about, hey, how can I build something and flip it? How can I build something and get another round of funding? It's not that. It's a pretty long road.
I'll just add one more point, and again, my personal bias towards this point, and I don't want to generalize it, but also having a moral compass is super critical, and not just from saying it is being true to the customer, being true to your employees, being true to the market. I think it's a very critical part which a lot of entrepreneurs miss. Some of them are also successful, but I don't consider it success if it works for, if it's not a win-win for the society. So I think it's a very important part for a good entrepreneur.
Okay, I think you guys are scaring a lot of people who came to get inspired by you. But anyway, jokes apart, maybe we could, I think we're kind of running out of time. So we'll conclude with a final comment from all three of you, starting from Vinayak.
So I think for me, again, one learning is it's a very lonely road. It's not about scaring. So, Sunil's, our duty is to give and express our experiences. My experience as an entrepreneur, my experience as a storyteller, my experience as a podcast host has been to actually see and understand what people have gone through and how many times people have actually failed to build what is in reality a success. So I think if you're jumping into this bandwagon for glamour, if you're jumping into this bandwagon for the so-called overnight success, if you're jumping in this bandwagon because you think, oh, you know what, raising capital is extremely glorified, having marquee investors on your cap table is extremely glorified, I think all of that is a fallacy. Because with everything comes responsibility. You have external people on your cap table, you have a responsibility to giving them an exit. You have debt, you have a responsibility to return the debt. You have your stakeholders, your early angels, you have a responsibility to give them some kind of a return back. Your employees, you have a responsibility to take care of their livelihoods. Your co-founders, you have a responsibility towards ensuring that you're together and always at all points of time, like Nakul outlined, from a moral compass perspective, you're all aligned. So for me, I think one of the things that you have to realize if you're going down this path, it's extremely lonely. It's extremely scary. It's extremely disheartening at stages. And if you're able to scale through those, if you're able to scrape through those, I think that sunshine at the end of the horizon, that is the brightest of all. Because I keep saying this, it's a calling that it calls you. You have to be blessed to be an entrepreneur. It's as much as a curse, as much as a blessing. But I think that blessing is only for few people. A lot of people don't have that advantage of that precariousness to say, यार महीने के end में 30 तारीख को तनख्वाह तो नहीं आने वाला है, उल्टा हमें तनख्वाह देना है. But I keep saying, रब का मेहर क्या है? हाथ ये हाथ आपका ऐसा. और हाथ ऐसा होना is a huge meher. So for me, I think as long as you bring that thought process, it's great. And in your mind, keep one thing. While you may believe you're alone, if you have that mindset calibrated across your team and founders, you have a tribe, and that tribe is nothing but a huge catalyst, huge springboard. So I keep saying this at the end. I'm going to sign off with one thing. I love doing these shairis, but one of the things was, an entrepreneur's mindset was asked to say, when you go through that tremor, that palpitation, what do you say to yourself? So you said, कि हम झूठों के बीच सच बोल बैठे, कि हम झूठों के बीच सच बोल बैठे, वो कमबख्त नमक का शहर था, वो कमबख्त नमक का शहर था, और हम अपने घाव खोल बैठे. So at the end of the day, keep that in the mindset and move ahead. That's the way I look at it.
Thanks, Vinayak. I'll actually take your cues, Neil, and dwell on the positives of it. Great time to be building in India. Absolutely amazing time to be building. As founders, as entrepreneurs, access to capital, an absolutely wonderful India stack with Aadhaar, with the fact that you can have identification wherever you are, data prices so low, consumer apps already being built onto that. So I applied for a credit card, and maybe I'm plugging a founder friend's product here, but I applied for a Scapia travel card. Previously, if any one of us in the room have applied for a credit card, it kind of takes its time. You fill a few forms, kuch din lagte hain. This particular onboarding was purely digital. There was a digital KYC, Aadhaar verified my identity, Google Maps pin location identified where I was locationally, and there was a video KYC done, etc., etc. All the onboarding was done in 5 minutes. The app then told me the features. Everything was done. The physical card landed up 2 days later. Everything happened so sweetly, in a jiffy. So the point I'm making is that this is a great time for us in India if we were to ever be founders, if we were ever to be entrepreneurs. Consumer behaviors are changing. Technology is enabling us. There's a lot of positive push by the government. And so therefore the overall ecosystem is great. Now, of course, what's the right problem? What's the right team? Is there a moral compass? Are you kind of fueled for the journey? Do you know yourself? All these are questions you have to answer for yourself.
Yeah, I'll just build on his, I've been traveling a lot past year and visited US, Japan. India is the place to be if you want to be an entrepreneur. We are biggest consumer market. We have the biggest talent pool available. Nowhere in the world where both of them are available except China, which is a closed market. So we are living in a privileged life for the next 10 years where entrepreneurship, if you are an entrepreneur in India, you have already crossed thresholds of markets and all those things which are to be shown on the VC PPT. So the only thing you have to now solve is the problem and then grow. So if you're not building in India in the next 10 years, then you are missing out. I have seen people who are now looking at India, how do they enter India, they build in India, they sell in India. I think we are at the cusp of a great time. So
Great time to build in India, make in India, and dream in India. Though, of course, as you said, those dreams would probably be over a long period of sleepless nights. So, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.